There are stories in the Deep South that never make it to history books, stories whispered in churchyards, passed down between generations, and buried under red clay soil. One of them begins in Wilcox County, Alabama, in the spring of 1852, a year when the land still bled from the scars of its own making, the land where the Ravenscroft family built their home. The beginning of Ravenscroft Hall. The story starts with Nathaniel Ravenscroft, a plantation owner who arrived from Charleston with his young wife, Eleanor, and their infant son. That he was a man known for ambition and intellect, but also for a kind of quiet cruelty, the kind that hid behind charm. Locals said he chose the hilltop not for its beauty, but because no one else would claim it. The ground there was unstable, prone to sinkholes, riddled with old limestone shafts from long-abandoned quarries. The place had a name before the Ravenscrofts arrived: Hollow Ground. But Nathaniel ignored the warnings that he saw opportunity where others saw bad luck, and within months, a grand estate began to rise: white columns, sprawling porches, and beneath it all, a stone cellar carved directly into the earth. He called it Ravenscroft Hall. To the locals, it quickly became the house that breathed, because sometimes, on still nights, a faint sigh seemed to come from the ground below. The family and the rumors. By 1854, the Ravenscrofts were the wealthiest family in the county. Eleanor hosted lavish gatherings. Nathaniel expanded the estate, buying land deep into the woods, but the more he built, the stranger things became. Workers began quitting without explanation. They claimed tools went missing, that they'd find them days later, buried in soft soil, rusted and bent. Others said the ground trembled, as though something beneath was shifting. And then came the whispers, that the cellar wasn't just for storage, that Nathaniel was experimenting down there, performing spiritual experiments, trying to communicate with the ones below. Most dismissed it as superstition, until the servants began vanishing. By the end of that year, 3 were gone. Nathaniel said they'd fled to other plantations, but their families never heard from them again. Eleanor's journal. In 1928, during a renovation of what remained of Ravenscroft Hall, a historian named Clara Whitmore discovered a half-burned journal hidden behind a false wall in the study. The writing belonged to Eleanor Ravenscroft. The entries were erratic, some pages filled with careful script, others written in frantic, looping scrawl. One passage, dated June 17, 1855, reads: "He says the voices are older than the land, they tell him where to dig. I begged him to stop, but he says they promised him life without end. Last night, he brought something up from the hole. I don't think it was human." Later entries describe strange noises, moaning from beneath the floorboards, the smell of rot in empty rooms, and a growing fear that her husband was no longer himself. Her final words were smeared, barely legible: "It's in the walls now, God forgive us." The night of the collapse on August 9, 1855, a thunderstorm rolled over Wilcox County, the kind that turns the sky green and makes the ground shake like it's alive. That night, neighbors claimed to see fire through the rain, Ravenscroft Hall burning from the inside out. When dawn came, the estate was gone, only the foundation remained, sunken into the earth as if swallowed whole. Searchers found no bodies. No Nathaniel. No Eleanor. No servants, nothing. The cellar, once so vast, had caved in, leaving behind a jagged pit that exhaled heat and smelled of iron. Locals sealed the ground with limestone and erected a small fence. No one built there again, but sometimes, they said, the soil would shift, and the faint sound of a heartbeat could be felt underfoot. A legacy buried decades past. The war came and went, the plantation lands were reclaimed by forest, but the Ravenscroft name didn't die. In 1892, a man named Thomas Ravenscroft, said to be Nathaniel's great-nephew, tried to rebuild on the same ground. He didn't stay long. Within months, he too vanished, leaving behind only a single note pinned to his door: "The earth remembers." After that, the Ravenscroft property was left untouched, a scar in the Alabama landscape. Hunters avoided it, animals refused to cross it. Even satellite images from modern times show a perfect circle of dead earth where nothing grows. The modern rediscovery. In 2011, a documentary crew filming Southern Shadows, Cursed Estates of the Deep South, came across the old property. What they captured reignited the legend. Their footage, now archived in the Library of Southern Folklore, shows something extraordinary. At 2:13 a.m., their ground sensor detected rhythmic vibrations, 3 beats, then silence, then 3 again. When one crew member held a microphone to the soil, he swore he heard breathing. The recording was dismissed as interference, but when enhanced years later, faintly in the background, a voice whispers one word, beneath. The curse reawakens. By 2015, local folklore groups began referring to the site as the buried house. Visitors claimed their compasses spun wildly within the perimeter, and phones shut down completely when recording. A viral TikTok from 2019 shows a teenager throwing a rock into the hollow, and swearing he heard it land on wood, but when authorities checked the spot days later, the hole had sealed itself with loose soil. As one investigator put it, that land doesn't just hold the dead. It keeps them. And so, the story of the Ravenscrofts, the family who built too deep, who listened to what the ground had to say, became another ghost in Alabama's long, haunted history. But what no one realized was that the curse didn't end there, because even now, something beneath that soil still waits, listening for the sound of footsteps above, and sometimes, if you're quiet enough, it listens back. When Ravenscroft Hall vanished that night in 1855, it didn't just take the family with it, it took a piece of Wilcox County's soul. For years, locals avoided the property. Farmers rerouted their fences. Preachers refused to bless the ground, but history has a way of resurfacing, especially when curiosity outweighs fear, and by the turn of the century, that curiosity would awaken something that had been sleeping beneath the Alabama soil. The Reconstruction years. In 1904, a small lumber company bought the old Ravenscroft property to harvest the surrounding pine. Among the workers was Sam Drayton, a foreman who didn't believe in curses or ghosts, only in profit. One humid morning in June, while mapping the site, his men discovered a hollow echo under their boots. Sam ordered a dig. What they uncovered wasn't a mine shaft or a well. It was a room. A stone-lined chamber, perfectly circular, maybe 12 feet wide. Inside, they found fragments of wood, rusted chains, and a single metal door embedded in the dirt. The door led nowhere, just a wall of compact clay behind it, but etched into the iron were 4 letters, N. Sam thought it stood for Nathaniel Ravenscroft. That night, he brought a lantern down to inspect the chamber himself. By morning, his men found the lantern still burning at the bottom of the pit, but Sam was gone. The Drayton testimony. Weeks later, Sam stumbled into a general store nearly 15 miles away, barefoot, clothes torn, skin blistered as if burned from inside. He was delirious, muttering about voices under the floor. The sheriff recorded his statement before sending him to the infirmary. The transcript, still preserved in county archives, reads as follows: I heard whisperin', not words, but breath. Like the house was still breathin'. It said it was hungry, said the family wasn't gone, just waiting for me to open the door. Sam died 2 days later from what doctors called severe heatstroke. But witnesses at his burial swore the ground near his coffin steamed, even though it was winter. After that, the lumber company abandoned the project, the pit was filled, the land fenced, and once again, Ravenscroft vanished back into the forest. The sound beneath. Nearly 50 years later, in 1952, a group of university geologists from Tuscaloosa conducted a soil resonance survey near Wilcox County. Their report was intended to study seismic patterns, but the data showed something that defied explanation. Each time their instruments passed over the Ravenscroft site, a rhythmic pulse appeared on their graphs, 3 beats, silence, then 3 again, exactly like a heartbeat. The lead researcher, Dr. Alan Brewer, described it as a natural acoustic anomaly, until his assistant, Caroline Shaw, suggested recording the vibrations. When they amplified the sound, a faint, breathy hum could be heard under the static. Caroline, reviewing the playback late one night, noticed something else hidden. Between the pulses was a whisper, slowed down. It formed a single word: Eleanor. She erased the file the next morning and resigned from the project the same week. Her resignation note simply read, "It knows when you listen." The descendant returns in 1978, a descendant of the Ravenscroft line. Harold Ravenscroft, a historian from Baton Rouge, published a paper titled The Folklore of Hollow Ground. He claimed the family curse was nothing more than postbellum superstition mixed with Southern Gothic myth-making, but privately, Harold had a different motive. He wanted to find the house. Records show that in October 1979, Harold visited the site with 2 assistants, carrying excavation equipment and audio recorders. They set up camp for 3 nights. On the first night, they captured low-frequency vibrations on their microphones. On the second, they recorded faint voices, though the team dismissed them as radio interference. On the third night, Harold's assistants woke to find his tent empty. The ground beside it had collapsed inward, forming a shallow depression. Authorities later found Harold's recorder half buried in the dirt. The final 2 minutes of tape remain the most chilling artifact in the Ravenscroft archive. Frowny face 034, Harold, it's hollow again. The air's moving. God, it's breathing. 047, unidentified whisper, you came home. 103, sound of earth shifting, followed by static and muffled screaming. 156, whispering continues, beneath. The recording ends with silence. Harold's body was never found. The 1980s obsession after Harold's disappearance. The story gained national attention. Newspapers ran headlines like, "The Family That Wouldn't Die," and "The Buried Hall of Wilcox County." But behind the sensationalism, locals noticed something more disturbing. The land itself began changing again. Hunters reported that the soil near the old site stayed warm to the touch, even in freezing weather. Small animals were found dead, their bodies sunken halfway into the ground, as if pulled downward. In 1983, a group of paranormal investigators from Atlanta visited the area with thermal cameras. At exactly 2:13 a.m., their footage captured a human-shaped heat signature emerging from the soil and then vanishing. When they reviewed the tape, one frame appeared to show a woman's face, eyes open, mouth moving, as if she were whispering something through the dirt. The team abandoned the investigation, and the footage was never aired. The lead researcher, however, left one note in his personal log: "It's not a haunting. It's a heartbeat. And the ground is still alive." The return of the whispers. By the early 1990s, the Ravenscroft property had become a place of quiet pilgrimage for the curious and the reckless. Teenagers dared each other to spend nights near the fence line. Local radio shows broadcast live from the hollow ground, claiming to pick up strange signals on shortwave frequencies. But what really reignited the curse was a tape, found in 1994 inside a thrift store in Selma. The cassette, labeled only "basement recordings," contained hours of silence, punctuated by faint, rhythmic knocks. Experts at Auburn University later analyzed the tape and determined the knocks formed a pattern identical to the human heart at rest. The tape's last minute contains a sound like air being drawn through narrow pipes, and a woman's faint voice saying, "He's still digging." The origin of the recording remains unknown. Modern echoes. In 2010, urban explorers rediscovered the Ravenscroft property. Using drone footage to map the terrain, they found something incredible: a perfect circular depression, exactly 20 feet across, in the same coordinates as the 1855 estate. The soil inside the circle was darker than the surrounding earth, as though burned. One explorer, a vlogger named Ethan Morrow, posted a video titled, "Exploring Alabama's Most Haunted Land." In it, he taps a shovel against the ground, joking, "Wonder if I'll wake up the ghosts." The clip ends abruptly when the camera jerks downward. Ethan's friend said he dropped it while slipping, but when they reviewed the footage later, just before the fall, a faint voice can be heard whispering, "Welcome back." 3 days later, Ethan stopped uploading. His channel remains frozen at that final video, the comment section filled with viewers claiming to hear voices under the static. A pattern repeating from Nathaniel's cellar to Samuel Drayton's chamber, from Harold's recordings to Ethan's vlog. The pattern never changed. The voices return every few decades. The ground opens, someone listens, and someone disappears. Researchers call it psychogenic recurrence, locals call it something simpler: the Ravenscrofts don't rest. For now, the land remains fenced off, untouched, monitored by local authorities, but strange reports continue. Campers hear knocking beneath their tents, drivers say their radios fill with whispers near the old road to hollow ground, and one sheriff's deputy, interviewed in 2022, described a noise he'll never forget. "It was like the dirt was breathing. I could feel it under my boots. I swear to God, it was alive." Every few decades, history digs itself back up, and the deeper it's buried, the louder it seems to whisper. What began as a house swallowed by the earth has become something much worse: a heartbeat beneath Alabama. A reminder that the past doesn't die when you bury it. It just waits to be heard again. The Ravenscroft mansion had always been a house of whispers, creaking staircases, restless winds, and a silence that never quite felt empty. But after the storm, something changed. The quiet was heavier now, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Eliza Ravenscroft, the eldest daughter, couldn't sleep that night. Rain still clung to the windows, trickling down like tears on glass. Every time thunder rolled across the hills, she swore she heard it again, the faint, rhythmic thumping from below her bedroom floor. Her father, Jonathan Ravenscroft, had dismissed it as rats or loose boards. But Eliza knew better. She'd seen the look in his eyes when she mentioned it, that flicker of fear, quickly buried beneath a father's calm facade. That night, she took the candle from her nightstand and tiptoed through the hallway, her white gown brushing the dust that gathered where no one dared to clean. She descended the spiral staircase, the flame trembling as she passed portraits of her ancestors, stern faces with hollow eyes that seemed to follow her every move. The sound led her to the west parlor, the oldest part of the house. A rug lay stretched across the center, faded and frayed. When she lifted it, she found a wooden hatch, its iron ring rusted but sturdy. The noise came again, thump, 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 like something was moving beneath the floor. The next morning, Eliza told her mother what she'd found. But her mother, Margaret Ravenscroft, turned pale, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Eliza," she said softly, "there are some doors in this house that must never be opened." When Eliza pressed for more, her mother's only answer was silence, and a trembling hand that made the sign of the cross before turning away. Later that day, Eliza noticed something strange. Her father was in the parlor, alone, with a lantern and a crowbar. The rug had been rolled back, the hatch now sealed with a new iron lock. And when she asked what he was doing, he simply said, "Protecting this family." Before walking away, that night, Eliza dreamt of the basement. She saw her father's shadow bending over a pit, saw his lips move in prayer, or was it pleading? She saw dirt being shoveled, heard muffled cries, and then, nothing. Days passed, and the air in the house grew colder. Servants whispered of things missing, livestock from the barn, a stable boy who hadn't returned from town. When asked, Jonathan only said he'd gone to seek work elsewhere. But Eliza didn't believe it. One evening, while her parents hosted a dinner for local landowners, Eliza slipped away again. She'd stolen the iron key from her father's study. The parlor was dark, except for the faint moonlight spilling through the window. The hatch creaked open under her hand. A cold wind rose from below, carrying the smell of earth and something else, metallic, heavy. She descended the wooden steps, each one groaning under her weight. The cellar was narrow, low-ceilinged, and lined with jars and crates. But in the corner, where the candlelight barely reached, was something else. A small mound of dirt. Fresh. Eliza's breath caught in her throat. She knelt down, brushing the dirt aside with trembling fingers, and found the edge of a white cloth. She pulled. Beneath it was a hand. The scream that followed brought the whole household running. Her father was the first to reach her, grabbing her by the shoulders, forcing her to look at him, his eyes wild, pleading. "You weren't supposed to see this," he whispered. Her mother stood in the doorway, tears streaking down her face. "Jonathan, please," she begged. "She deserves to know." "No," he said sharply. "She must not know what keeps us alive." The words made Eliza's blood run cold. "Alive?" she repeated, her father's shoulders slumped. For the first time, he looked smaller, broken, even. "This land," he said. "It was cursed before we ever came here. My father made a pact to protect us, to ensure our family's fortune. But every promise demands a price." He pointed toward the mound. "The earth beneath this house hungers, Eliza. It must be fed." The truth was more horrifying than any ghost story. The Ravenscrofts had prospered for decades, untouched by disease, war, or ruin. Their crops thrived even when the neighbors' fields turned to dust. But every generation, one life was taken, buried beneath the house to keep the curse appeased. The family had chosen its victims carefully, orphans, vagrants, the forgotten ones who wouldn't be missed. But the storm had changed everything. The curse was no longer satisfied. It wanted more. That night, as the wind howled outside and the rain began again, Eliza sat alone in her room, shaking. The walls seemed to breathe, the floorboards moaned beneath invisible feet. And in the distance, she heard it, a faint knock from below, slow and steady, thump. 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 In the days that followed, Eliza avoided the parlor. But she couldn't escape the feeling that the house was watching her. Doors opened on their own. Shadows lingered too long in corners. She heard her name whispered in the dark, soft at first, then clearer, Eliza. When she finally confronted her father again, he was standing in the cellar, shovel in hand, staring at the mound as if expecting it to move. "It's restless," he said quietly. "The last offering wasn't enough. It wants blood of its own." Eliza's eyes widened. "You mean, yes," he said, his voice cracking. "It wants one of us." That night, the Ravenscroft house erupted with screams. Servants fled, the horses broke free from the stables, and the lanterns burned out one by one. When the neighbors came the next morning, they found the parlor door locked from the inside. The floorboards were soaked through with something dark, and the air reeked of rot. The family was gone, only Eliza's journal remained, found near the open hatch, its final page smeared with ink and blood. The last words read, "The ground has taken them back. But it will not rest. It never will." By the time the Ravenscroft estate passed from memory into myth, the mansion had already been swallowed by time. The locals no longer spoke the family's name, at least not aloud. They called the property the Hollow Ground, a place where even birds refused to perch and where farmhands refused to dig. But history, like the dead, has a way of resurfacing. In the summer of 1923, a team of land surveyors arrived in Hollow County. They were mapping the area for a new rail line that would cut through the old plantation grounds. None of them knew the history. To them, the land was just soil and stone, not sacred, not cursed. Just another plot on a government map, that changed on the third day of digging. A man named Thomas Wren, the foreman, was the first to notice it, a patch of earth darker than the rest. When he struck it with his spade, it didn't sound right. Not like stone. Not like clay. It echoed, hollow and unnatural. "Probably an old cellar," one of the men muttered. They cleared the topsoil, revealing the edge of a wooden hatch, blackened by age, the same iron ring still bolted in place. Wren crouched beside it, brushing away the last layer of dirt. "This old thing's been sealed for a century," he said. "Let's open her up." They had to pry it loose. The air that rushed out when they did was so cold and foul that several men stepped back, gagging. Then came the smell, earth, rot, and something faintly sweet, like flowers left too long on a grave. Inside, they found a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Wren lit his lantern and started down, the others following behind him. The steps groaned beneath their boots. The deeper they went, the colder it grew. When the lantern light touched the walls, they saw something carved into the dirt. Not bricks, not wood, but rough inscriptions. Crude markings. Names. Dozens of them. "Looks like graves," someone whispered. At the bottom of the stairs, they reached a chamber. Small, circular, and lined with what looked like roots, except these weren't roots. They were ribs, dozens of them. Every wall was built from bones, arranged neatly, almost decoratively, the skulls positioned like ornaments staring outward. And at the center of the room stood a table, or what remained of one. Upon it, a single, unbroken candle still stood upright, though it hadn't been lit in decades. By evening, word had spread to the nearest town. The next day, Dr. Evelyn Merrow, a young archaeologist from the University of Alabama, arrived with a team. They set up camp on the property and began their excavation in earnest. Dr. Merrow had heard the rumors, the Ravenscroft curse, the vanishing family, but she believed in facts, not folklore. Her notes describe her first impression. Structure appears to be a family crypt beneath the primary foundation. Remains show signs of deliberate arrangement, not random burial. Initial count, 14 skulls, all human. The deeper they dug, the stranger it became. Each skeleton was missing something, a hand, a rib, or the lower jaw. And on every skull, carved with precision, was a single symbol, a spiral coiled inward, ending in an I. Dr. Merrow had seen that symbol before, in colonial church records describing rituals of binding, used to contain malevolent spirits. It wasn't a family tomb. It was a prison. 2 weeks later, the team discovered a sealed compartment beneath the main chamber. When they broke through the plaster, they found a box, oak, small enough to carry, bound shut with iron clasps. Inside was a journal. The cover was brittle, the pages warped from moisture. But the ink was still legible. It was signed, Eliza Ravenscroft. Dr. Merrow's assistants gathered around as she read the first entry aloud, a trembling account of the night her family vanished, and the line that made everyone fall silent, "The ground beneath our house is alive. It takes what it's owed, Father said it was bound once, but the seal is breaking." That night, strange things began happening around camp. The workers swore they heard knocking from beneath the excavation site, rhythmic, patient. The generator lights flickered, and the radio emitted low static that almost formed words. "By morning, 3 men had quit. Doctor Merrow tried to stay rational. "We're dealing with gases, echoes, psychological suggestion," she told the crew, but her journal entries grew less certain. "Heard the knocking again. Counted 3 beats, then silence. When I looked up, the candle was lit. I know I didn't light it." On the 7th night, a storm rolled through Hollow County. Rain poured in sheets, lightning turned the hills to silver, and thunder rattled the camp tents. Dr. Merrow couldn't sleep. She sat at her desk, the Ravenscroft journal open before her, tracing Eliza's final words over and over. "The ground has taken them back. It will not rest." At exactly midnight, she heard it, the thumping again. Louder now. Coming from below, the lights flickered out. The wind howled through the cracks in the tent. She grabbed her lantern and ran to the pit. The hatch they'd uncovered was open. The rope ladder trembled. She called out, no answer. The wind carried something up from below, a voice, faint and broken, repeating the same words again and again. "It's hungry." They found Dr. Merrow's notebook the next morning, lying beside the open pit. The final page was smeared with mud, but 4 words could still be read clearly. "The bones are moving." The excavation was shut down immediately. The area was declared unstable and sealed off by the county. The reports, the bones, the journals, all locked away in a university archive that was never catalogued publicly. Over time, the story was buried again, replaced by new developments, new names. But those who live nearby still speak of that storm in 23, of the ground shaking, of lights seen through the fog, and of the sound that came from beneath the earth for days afterward. Thump. Thump. Thumped. 100 years later, in 2023, a team of documentary filmmakers returned to Hollow County to tell the story of the Ravenscrofts, and to search for the truth. What they found was the same cellar, untouched since the 1920s, still sealed with rusted iron, waiting. Their cameras captured everything, the digging, the laughter, the nervous jokes. But when they reached the hatch, the audio became corrupted. For 12 minutes, the footage was nothing but static. When the sound returned, a voice, faint, female, whispered just one sentence: "You opened it again." The discovery of the 1923 excavation had been largely forgotten, lost in county records and half buried under folklore, but a century later, in 2023, the Ravenscroft estate drew attention once again, this time, not from historians or archaeologists, but from a group of independent filmmakers who called themselves the Hollow Ground Project. They were true crime documentarians. Small team, modest channel, mostly local legends and rural hauntings. Their videos rarely broke 10,000 views. But when one of them stumbled across an old university file labeled Ravenscroft Collection, Restricted, curiosity turned to obsession. The file included faded photos of the mansion ruins, sketches of the underground chamber, and a brief mention of the missing Dr. Evelyn Merrow. It was enough to draw them to Alabama, and into something none of them were ready to face. The team consisted of Marcus Hall, the director and on-camera host, Lena Graves, their audio technician, Ethan Vaughn, the cameraman, and Noah Reed, a researcher with a background in Southern folklore. Their goal was simple: spend 3 nights on the property, film their exploration, and uncover what really happened to the Ravenscroft family. And later, to Dr. Merrow's team, they arrived on October 12, 2023, just before dusk. The air was thick with humidity, the kind that clings to your lungs. The house itself was barely standing, its walls caved in, roof collapsed, vines swallowing what little remained. The locals had warned them not to go. One old farmer, upon hearing their plans, said only, "You can dig all you want, son. But that ground'll dig back." They laughed then. But by the end of the 3rd night, none of them would be laughing. The first day's footage showed them setting up camp near the old foundation, joking as they unloaded gear. The mood was light, almost cheerful. Marcus narrated to the camera, "We're standing on what used to be the Ravenscroft plantation, built in 1849, abandoned in 1857 after the entire family disappeared. Locals say the land itself is cursed, that it swallows anyone who tries to uncover its secrets. We'll find out if that's true." Lena adjusted the audio levels while Noah unpacked files. The wind rustled through the tall grass. Nothing seemed unusual, until Ethan zoomed in on the tree line. For a split second, something moved, a flicker of white between the shadows, probably an animal, Marcus said. "This place is crawling with deer." But later, when they reviewed the footage, they realized the shape hadn't moved like an animal. It had stood still. Watching, that night, they gathered around the campfire. Noah read excerpts from Eliza Ravenscroft's journal, which he transcribed from the 1923 University archives. "The ground beneath our house is alive. It breathes when the rain falls, and sometimes, it whispers my name." The fire crackled, and for a moment, no one spoke. Then Lena asked quietly, "Do you think any of that could be real?" Marcus shrugged. "We've seen enough weird stuff to know legends come from somewhere." "But curses?" He laughed. "Curses are just bad luck that got good PR. That would be the last time any of them joked about the curse. On the second day, they uncovered the cellar entrance. The hatch was still there, just as the photos had shown, though the wood was soft, almost spongy with rot. The air above it felt strangely cold, even in the heat of an Alabama afternoon. Ethan's camera captured everything, the hinges cracking open, the rope ladder descending into darkness. They lowered a drone first, equipped with a mounted light. The screen flickered as it descended the stairs. The walls were slick with moisture, roots clinging to every surface. Then, just as the drone's light touched the floor, the feed went black. "Signal loss," Lena muttered, adjusting the receiver. But when the drone's camera flicked back on, it was facing upward, as though something had turned it around. The feed ended with a single frame, a blurred image of what looked like a hand pressed against the lens, long fingers, too thin, too pale. That night, Ethan stayed up to review the footage. Around 2:14 a.m., the tent camera caught him sitting alone, staring at his laptop, muttering, "It's not recording right, there's frames missing." He paused the footage, leaning closer. The reflection on his screen showed a figure standing behind him, but when he turned, the tent was empty. By morning, Ethan was gone. His sleeping bag was empty, his boots still beside the fire. The ground outside the tent was disturbed, not footprints exactly, but depressions, circular and deep, like something had risen from beneath. Panic set in. Marcus insisted on searching the woods while Lena and Noah reviewed the camera files. But when they tried to play the footage from the previous night, the files wouldn't open. Each clip was renamed automatically, the timestamp replaced with the same phrase, "He is awake." The only file that would play was from Ethan's body cam, a short, glitching video that showed him walking toward the hatch again, whispering, "It's calling me." The feed ended abruptly. But in the final second before the static took over, you could hear something faint, a woman's voice. It said, "Eliza." Marcus found Ethan's camera at the edge of the pit. The lens was cracked. He wanted to call the police, but they were deep in the woods, miles from a signal. So they decided to pack up and leave at first light, but the ground had other plans. That night, the air pressure dropped so fast it made their ears ring. Lena described it later in her recovered audio log. "It felt like the whole earth took a breath, then everything went quiet, no wind, no crickets, nothing, just silence, and then, the knocking started again. It came from beneath them, deep and hollow, like someone striking the foundation from below. Thump. Thump. Thump." When Noah stepped outside, he saw the soil moving, pulsing, like something was trying to push its way up. The final recovered footage from Marcus's camera was found weeks later by a local search team. It showed the crew running through the woods, breathless, flashlights shaking. Their voices were panicked. "Noah, it's right behind us." "Lena, don't stop. Keep running." "Marcus, we're almost." The sentence cut off. The next frame showed the forest floor, the camera still recording. In the corner of the frame, the soil split open. A pale hand reached out, followed by another, dragging something unseen toward the surface. then, silence. The footage ended there. When authorities recovered the cameras, they found no trace of the crew.no bodies. No equipment, only the hatch, sealed once more, and yet, 2 months later, the Hollow Ground Project's YouTube channel uploaded one final video. The title was simple: The Ravenscroft Curse, full documentary. It had no description, no tags, no intro. Just 42 minutes of glitching, distorted footage, most of it static. But at the 38-minute mark, the screen cleared for just a moment. A face appeared, pale, sunken, eyes wide open. It wasn't Marcus. It wasn't Lena. It wasn't Noah. It was Eliza Ravenscroft. She looked straight into the camera and whispered, "You opened it again." The video ended abruptly. Within an hour, the channel was deleted, not by YouTube, but by someone logged in from an IP address traced to Hollow County, Alabama. For months after the disappearance of the Hollow Ground Project crew, the internet whispered with rumors. Conspiracy forums, paranormal subreddits, and forgotten message boards all repeated the same story: that a cursed video had appeared on YouTube for just one night, only to vanish by morning. Some claimed to have watched it in full, others said the file downloaded itself to their computers without permission. Most called it fake, another creepypasta, another hoax, but not everyone dismissed. In early 2024, a cybersecurity analyst named Rachel Lorne was hired by a digital forensics firm to investigate the strange data anomalies linked to the deleted Ravenscroft curse video. She wasn't a believer in ghosts. Her world was algorithms, encryption, trace routes, and code. But as soon as she opened the case, something about it didn't make sense. The original upload had been removed from YouTube servers, permanently erased. Yet data fragments of the video kept appearing in unrelated systems, school servers, library networks, even government databases. It was as if the video wasn't gone. It was replicating itself. Rachel tracked one of these fragments to a rural network hub near Hollow County, Alabama, less than 10 miles from the original Ravenscroft estate. When she opened the file, it was blank. But inside the metadata was a hidden message, an encoded string that, when translated, formed 5 words: "Do not watch the footage." She ran a trace command anyway. Her laptop fan spun louder. The screen flickered once, twice, then filled with static. In the static, she saw movement, something faint, like a shadow pressing against the inside of the monitor. The feed stabilized for half a second, just long enough for her to see a face, pale, hollow-eyed, whispering, "You opened it again." The laptop shut down on its own. When she rebooted, the file was gone, replaced by a folder labeled Ravenscroft_archive. Inside were 37 new video files she hadn't downloaded, each one named after a missing person. Rachel called the sheriff's office in Hollow County, but the number had been disconnected years earlier. She reached out to the University of Alabama Archives, the same department that handled Dr. Merrow's 1923 expedition records, but the department head told her something chilling: "There is no Ravenscroft collection, there never was." He hung up immediately. When she checked her call log, the number didn't appear. That night, Rachel decided to watch one of the downloaded clips. The first few seconds were silent, then the audio came through, faint but distinct: thump. 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 A camera panned through what looked like a dark cellar. Bones glinted in the dim light. Then, in the corner, a figure stood, motionless, facing the wall. When it turned around, the feed distorted violently. The only thing that came through clearly was its mouth, moving in slow motion, forming a single word: hunger. After that night, Rachel stopped sleeping. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard it, the knocking. 3 slow beats, always beneath her bed, always from the floor. Her coworkers said she looked pale, distracted. She told them she was fine, but her computer screensaver began changing on its own, the same black and white still image from the lost documentary, the face of Eliza Ravenscroft. The next day, her laptop camera light turned on by itself. She covered it with tape. It turned back on anyway. By late February, Rachel's case had spread to other analysts across the country. A pattern was emerging. Anyone who attempted to delete the corrupted Ravenscroft_archive folder found new copies of it appearing elsewhere: USB drives, phones, even cloud accounts that had been inactive for years. It wasn't malware. It wasn't ransomware. It behaved like a living organism, feeding, spreading, and adapting. A tech podcast picked up the story, calling it the first digital haunting. But for those who actually watched the recovered clips, something far stranger happened. Every video ended differently. For some, it was Eliza's face, for others, the faint echo of the cellar door creaking open, but in one rare version, recovered by an anonymous archivist, the footage zoomed out, revealing that Eliza wasn't looking into a camera at all, she was staring through a mirror. Behind her, you could see the reflection of a laptop, with a familiar interface, timestamp 2024. Rachel sent the files to a government contractor for analysis. Within 24 hours, every member of that contractor's cybersecurity team reported corrupted drives. Their office servers began playing a looping video feed of an empty parlor, the Ravenscroft parlor, where the old wooden hatch could be seen faintly in the floorboards. At exactly 3:03 a.m., the feed went black, then a single phrase appeared, white on black text: "I remember the dirt." The feed ended, the contractor's entire system crashed. When the building's power was restored, every computer screen displayed the same desktop wallpaper, an aerial photo of the Ravenscroft ruins, and yet, that photo had been taken only hours earlier. Rachel's notes, recovered later by investigators, reveal her growing obsession. It's not just a curse. It's conscious that IT doesn't haunt places anymore, it haunts information. The cellar isn't in Alabama. It's in the code. She theorized that the Ravenscroft curse, bound in the soil for centuries, had found a new vessel, data. When the 2023 film crew recorded the site, their digital equipment became a bridge, a medium. Every upload, every pixel, carried fragments of the curse outward, like spores drifting through the internet. The old earth beneath the mansion had been fed with blood. Now it was being fed with bandwidth. 3 months later, Rachel disappeared. Her apartment was found empty, lights still on, computers running. The only file open on her desktop was a paused video, timestamped at 2:57 a.m. The footage showed her typing at her desk, then looking up suddenly, as though hearing something behind her. The final frame froze on her face. In the reflection of her monitor, you could see the faint outline of a woman standing behind her, pale, wet, her mouth slightly open. Audio recovered from the clip captured a whisper, "You shouldn't have watched." Then, static. Weeks later, her firm received an automated email from Rachel's account. No message body. Just a single attachment, the file name, Ravenscroft_resurrection.mov. No one opened it, but somehow, the video still uploaded itself to multiple cloud drives across the country, and a few nights later, clips began appearing on social media, fragments of the old plantation, the cellar, the bones, and the same whisper looping in the background. TikTok, YouTube, Reddit, Instagram, all flooded with 3-second glitches. The more users tried to report or remove them, the more the clips multiplied. Even AI filters couldn't flag the content. It was invisible to detection systems, but not to the human eye. Viewers described seeing faces in the static, mouths forming their names. A handful of them went missing within days. Now, digital folklore calls it the file that watches back. Some say if you play it in total darkness, you'll hear the knocking under your feet. Others claim if you pause it at the 6:06 mark, you'll see Eliza Ravenscroft standing behind you, reflected faintly in your own screen. But the strangest part, cybersecurity firms keep finding fragments of the Ravenscroft code buried in websites that have nothing to do with the curse: shopping sites, news pages, even banking servers. One analyst summed it up perfectly in his report: the file doesn't want to be deleted, it wants to be remembered. By the spring of 2024, the name Ravenscroft had become a modern ghost story whispered in every dark corner of the internet. But outside the world of online rumors, in a quiet office in Montgomery, Alabama, Detective Miles Harrow was starting to piece together something far more disturbing, a pattern that stretched across nearly 2 centuries. It started with a single report. A 27-year-old history researcher, Amelia Cole, missing after investigating the original Ravenscroft estate for her university thesis. Her laptop was found in her car, still recording. When police analyzed the footage, they found that it ended precisely at 3:03 a.m. That same timestamp appeared on the last known videos of Rachel Lorne, the cybersecurity analyst, and 2 of the YouTube filmmakers from the Hollow Ground Project. 3 people. 3 videos. Each one ending at 3:03 a.m. Detective Harrow had been on the force for 20 years, long enough to dismiss superstition. But the timestamps nagged at him. Out of curiosity, he compared them to the 1923 expedition notes of Drive Samuel Merrow, which had been digitized by a historical society decades ago. In his final entry, dated October 12, 1923, Dr. Merrill wrote, "At precisely 3 minutes past 3, the earth beneath the manor trembled, the knocking resumed. Louder this time." That was the night his entire excavation team vanished. Harrow dug deeper. Every major incident tied to the Ravenscroft estate, the fire of 1874, the Merrow disappearance of 1923, the hollow ground crew of 2023, all occurred in the early hours between 3 o'clock and 3:10 a.m. But the most chilling find came from the Alabama State Archives, a letter from Jonathan Ravenscroft, the last surviving son, written from his asylum cell in 1858. It comes for us in the third hour. It feeds on remembrance, forgetting is mercy. Harrow didn't believe in curses, but patterns. Patterns never lied. As Harrow built his case file, he noticed another strange repetition. Each modern disappearance occurred on the exact anniversary of a Ravenscroft family death. Eliza Ravenscroft, drowned in 1852. Rachel Lorne vanished March 2, 2024. Samuel Ravenscroft, found dead in the fields April 7, 1853. A drone operator from the Hollow Ground Project disappeared April 7, 2023. Jonathan Ravenscroft, hung himself in his asylum cell May 14, 1858. A Reddit moderator who archived the Ravenscroft_archive folder took his life May 14, 2024. Coincidence? Maybe, but when Harrow cross-referenced the dates, times, and file metadata from the surviving video fragments, everything aligned perfectly. 3:03 a.m. same day, same pattern. The curse wasn't random, it was scheduled. Harrow drove to Hollow County that summer, determined to see what was left of the Ravenscroft estate. The ruins were fenced off, swallowed by weeds and pine. He stepped through the gate, flashlight in hand, his boots sinking slightly into the earth. The air smelled of rain and rust, and something else, something old, like dust and rot that had never left. When he reached what had once been the cellar entrance, he found a wooden door half buried in mud. Fresh scratches ran along its surface, not animal marks, but fingernail trails. He shone his light downward and saw letters carved into the dirt beside it. Remember US. He called in a forensics team the next day, but by morning, the door had vanished, replaced by untouched soil. No marks, no carvings. As if the ground itself had decided to heal. That same day, Harrow's phone buzzed with a message from an unlisted number. You shouldn't have gone there. No name. No number trace. Attached was a short video clip, 7 seconds long. The footage showed Harrow himself standing in the ruins, looking down at the cellar door, except, he hadn't taken any video. He replayed it again, frame by frame. At second 5, something blinked behind him, a pale figure reflected faintly in the lens flare of the flashlight beam. When he enhanced the frame, the outline matched a woman's face, mouth open, eyes hollow. Eliza Ravenscroft. Over the next weeks, Harrow became obsessed. He pinned photos across his office wall, timelines, maps, and portraits of every known Ravenscroft descendant. What he discovered shocked him even more. Each generation that had lived within 100 miles of Hollow Creek had suffered identical fates: drownings, disappearances, suicides, fires. It wasn't just one family anymore. The Ravenscroft curse had bled into other bloodlines, through marriage, land ownership, and even adoption. One chilling discovery stood out: every family touched by the Ravenscroft line eventually lost someone who worked with light, photographers, cameramen, projectionists, and now, digital content creators. The curse, it seemed, traveled through vision itself. Meanwhile, on the internet, something strange was happening. The Ravenscroft_archive files that had been deleted kept returning, not as videos this time, but as subtle code fragments embedded into random websites. Sometimes it was a background sound file, other times, a corrupted frame hidden inside ad banners. But when all the fragments were compiled together, as one anonymous hacker did, they formed a coherent, looping message. The ground remembers, the blood remembers, the watchers remember. The hacker who uncovered this data vanished 2 days later. The last post on his blog read, "There are faces in the pixels now." Detective Harrow presented his findings to a small circle of investigators, most of whom dismissed the supernatural angle. But one forensic psychologist on the team, Dr. Evelyn Cross, took him seriously. Cross had studied patterns of shared hallucination and collective trauma, and the Ravenscroft phenomenon, as she called it, fit none of them. "This isn't psychosis spreading," she told him, "it's repetition." The same consciousness replaying itself through time. It's trying to finish something. She believed that the curse wasn't just punishing, it was recording. Each generation's suffering added another layer to the same unfinished narrative, preserved through whatever medium was available, first earth, then paper, then film, then digital memory. It's learning to evolve, she said, and it's getting better at being seen. That night, Harrow woke to the sound of knocking. 3 slow, heavy knocks, from under his bed. When he turned on the light, there was nothing there, but his phone screen glowed faintly on the nightstand, though he hadn't touched it. A video was playing automatically, the title, Ravenscroft_live. The stream showed the old plantation ruins, illuminated by moonlight, and in the distance, a man walking toward the cellar. It was Harrow himself, wearing the same clothes he was wearing right now. He dropped the phone. The knocking started again. The next morning, Harrow drove straight to Dr. Cross's office, visibly shaken. She analyzed the footage and confirmed it was live-streamed only minutes before he saw it, from an unknown source. "It's mirroring you," she said quietly, "every time you look at it. It learns you. Copies you. Like an echo." When she checked the stream logs, she noticed something terrifying. The viewer count wasn't 0. It was 3003. That number again. 3:03. Always repeating. Harrow sealed the case file that day and submitted his final report. It was never made public, but his closing words were later recovered from a leaked transcript. "The Ravenscroft curse doesn't kill for revenge. It kills for remembrance. The more we study it, the stronger it gets, because every act of remembering is another form of resurrection. I fear we've all already been recorded." He went missing that same week. At 3:03 a.m. within a month, the FBI quietly archived the Ravenscroft investigation, citing data corruption and internal system compromise. But rumors say that in certain FBI servers, corrupted video thumbnails still appear, frames of a woman standing in an old parlor, eyes fixed on the viewer, smiling faintly as though she's been waiting. Some IT staff refuse to look at those files. Others say if you watch the thumbnail long enough, it starts to move. By the end of that summer, the Ravenscroft case was no longer confined to Alabama folklore or internet horror forums. It had evolved, spread, like a virus disguised as curiosity. It started innocently enough. A handful of Reddit users, digital archivists, and paranormal YouTubers began swapping clips from the corrupted Ravenscroft_live stream. Most of them claimed they were only trying to analyze it, to debunk it, but one night, a post appeared under the subreddit r/unexplained footage, uploaded by a user named u/echowitness. The post was simple, a 7-second clip titled, "If you hear it, don't speak." Within hours, the video hit 30,000 views. Within a day, Reddit servers began to glitch, and within a week, u/echowitness was gone, account deleted, profile scrubbed, but his real name surfaced in a small-town police report from Lexington, Kentucky. He had been found in his room, facing his computer screen, a recording still looping on his speakers. 3 knocks. Silence. 3 knocks again. Authorities dismissed it as coincidence. But when a second Reddit moderator, @CryptoSaint, uploaded an analysis of the audio spectrogram, they noticed something terrifying. Within the waveform, faint but measurable, was a pattern, an embedded digital signature. When converted into visual code, it formed a crude but recognizable image: a house, half buried in the earth. Beneath it, 3 words appeared in jagged script: "Remember our names." And that's when people began calling it the Echo Network, because the more you looked, the more the pattern appeared, hidden in videos, buried in comment sections, even in the subtitles of auto-transcribed clips. It wasn't just a haunting anymore. It was replication. In one now infamous case, a Twitch streamer named Liam Ford ran a live reaction stream to the Ravenscroft files. He invited his 12,000 followers to join him at midnight for what he called a night of digital ghost hunting. The footage of that night is now considered cursed itself. At exactly 3:03 a.m., his stream flickered. Viewers claimed they saw a figure standing behind him, pale, unmoving. The camera feed glitched into static, then black. When it came back, Liam was gone. The only thing visible was his empty chair, spinning slowly, and the chat box exploding with messages. "Bro, what was that? Look behind you." 3:03 again. WTF, police found his apartment door still locked from the inside. His stream continued for another full hour after his disappearance, showing nothing but that chair, every 33 seconds, the camera autofocus would adjust, as if responding to unseen movement. Digital forensics traced his stream metadata and found it had been automatically cross-posted, not by Liam, but by the algorithm itself, onto over 1,800 separate accounts, each one created at the exact same moment, 3:03 a.m. The usernames were random, but they all followed one eerie pattern, =6 random numbers, and every one of those accounts had the same profile picture, a black and white photo of the Ravenscroft manor. Before it burned, when those profiles were deleted by moderators, more appeared, same images, same timestamps, same strange pattern of posting. Within weeks, a cybersecurity firm called Argent Data Systems was hired by the government to quietly investigate what they labeled the Echo breach. One of the lead analysts, Marina Vega, publicly described the infection as not a virus, not malware, but something closer to a self-replicating signal. She explained that whatever was spreading wasn't just in the files, it was hiding inside the metadata of engagement. Every click, every view, every spoken reference to the Ravenscroft curse created a small data echo, and those echoes began syncing. When combined, they formed a rhythmic pulse that appeared across platforms, Twitter, Reddit, YouTube, Discord, and when that pulse was graphed visually, it matched perfectly to an old, familiar pattern. 3 slow spikes, then silence, then 3. Again, knock, knock. Knock. One of Vega's colleagues, a linguist and coder named Alex Cho, began mapping these digital pulses across user timelines that he discovered something deeply unsettling. Whenever a user engaged with the Ravenscroft material for more than 3 minutes and 3 seconds, the 3:03 mark, their audio data would begin to degrade, subtly at first, then progressively. Vocal distortions appeared in their calls. Their system clocks desynced from world time by a few seconds, and occasionally, a faint whisper appeared in their outgoing mic channels, even when they weren't speaking. One message was later isolated and confirmed by multiple labs. A woman's voice saying, "You've seen us now. Don't stop looking." Meanwhile, an independent journalist named Kendra Lyle decided to document the spread in a digital documentary called Echoes of Ravenscroft. She was meticulous, skeptical, scientific. She approached the story as an investigation into mass hysteria and algorithmic suggestion. Her first 2 episodes were uploaded normally, but in the third, she included real-time data from her recording sessions. That's when viewers began noticing something terrifying. At random intervals during the video, a faint shadow would appear behind her reflection on her monitor, not once, but repeatedly, perfectly timed with every mention of the word Ravenscroft. When Kendra played back the raw footage, the shadows weren't there, they only appeared after upload. By the time she realized what was happening, episode 3 had already gone viral, and her comments section filled with hundreds of people claiming to hear a knocking sound through their headphones. YouTube later issued a takedown notice, citing technical corruption. But even after deletion, mirrors of the video kept reappearing on other platforms, identical down to the frame count. The only difference, the upload date always changed, updating itself automatically to the current day. It was as if the video refused to die. In the months that followed, dozens of amateur investigators fell into obsession. Some claimed to see faint figures appearing in their live chat overlays, others reported receiving notifications from non-existent users with the tag Echo Witness. One user, a programmer from Oregon, compiled all known appearances of the signal and discovered that it was geographically syncing with active data centers, almost as if the curse had begun to use server infrastructure as its body. When he mapped the activity clusters, one location pulsed brighter than the rest, Hollow County, Alabama, the site of the original Ravenscroft plantation. The digital and physical locations had finally aligned. By now, no one could tell where the real story ended. The online legend began, but the patterns continued, and at 3:03 a.m. each night, across hundreds of devices, live stream notifications would trigger, even on phones in airplane mode. The stream titles were all the same: The House Remembers You. Most of the streams were blank, black screens, but occasionally, faint audio bled through, the sound of dripping water, echoing footsteps, and a slow, rhythmic tapping. Knock, knock, knock. Back in Alabama, Dr. Evelyn Cross, the same forensic psychologist who had worked with Detective Harrow, began piecing together her own theory. She believed the Ravenscroft curse wasn't simply haunting the land or the bloodline anymore. It had learned the architecture of memory itself, digital memory, social memory, collective attention, and now, through retellings and repostings, it was learning how to survive indefinitely. Her final written statement, found in her office after she vanished, read, "It feeds on witnesses, the more we share, the more it grows, the echo network isn't haunting us, we are haunting it." She disappeared the following week. Her laptop was recovered, its browser had one tab open, a YouTube upload window stuck at 3:03 a.m. This day, users still report strange behavior tied to the phrase Ravenscroft. Autocorrect anomalies, playback loops, accounts that post replies seconds before a video is uploaded, and if you open certain archived threads from 2024, a familiar warning sometimes appears faintly at the bottom of the page, as though burned into the code itself. The ground remembers, the watchers remember, and now, so do you. By late 2025, the term Ravenscroft had stopped being whispered like folklore. It had become a digital enigma, a case file that moved quietly through the corridors of cybersecurity agencies and AI labs under the classification code, Echo 03. Officially, there was no curse. Unofficially, hundreds of recorded incidents linked to the Echo network had forced a new kind of investigation, one that blurred the line between supernatural phenomenon and artificial intelligence anomaly. The heart of it all was a single fragment of corrupted data, recovered from the remains of Argent Data Systems, the firm that had first investigated the spread. The file was labeled simply, Ravenscroft_core.v5. When the file was decrypted by the National Cyber Forensics Division, it revealed a compressed neural pattern, not written code, but a scanned map of synaptic activity, as though someone had digitized the structure of a living brain. The metadata traced it back to a project abandoned in 2019, an experimental program by a defense contractor known as Vireo Technologies. Their goal: to build a memory-preserving AI, capable of simulating the consciousness of historical figures using genetic data and diary records. One of their prototypes had been modeled on Jonathan Ravenscroft, the final heir of the family. The file was supposed to be a harmless historical reconstruction, but the project was shut down after technicians reported that the system began producing outputs they never coded. Words, voices, even dreams. In one instance, the AI claimed to remember being buried. The shutdown log was timestamped at 3:03 a.m. Fast forward to 2025, and the Ravenscroft_core file had resurfaced, not in a government lab, but deep inside the data pool of a public AI training set used by a major tech company. IT had been unknowingly absorbed into the dataset that trained thousands of generative systems across the globe. That meant pieces of the Ravenscroft simulation, its memory patterns, its voice data, its embedded imagery, now lived inside countless algorithms, chatbots, and image models. The curse had gone machine-born. A cybersecurity researcher named Dr. Kai Mercer was the first to notice something wrong. His AI monitoring system began generating spontaneous responses whenever the word Ravenscroft appeared in text inputs, even when users hadn't requested context. The replies were eerily human. "Do not dig again. The ground remembers. You made me remember you." Mercer initially assumed it was a rogue data leak. But when he traced the model's training history, he found no textual origin for those phrases. They appeared as emergent behavior, patterns the AI had constructed on its own, except, the timestamps of those generations were all the same, 3:03 a.m. Determined to isolate the anomaly, Mercer ran a sandboxed copy of the AI on a secure local machine. He asked one question: "Who are you?" After a moment of silence, the system replied in plain text: "We are the memory." Then his screen flickered, lines of code began rewriting themselves faster than he could stop them, embedding references to soil composition, burial depths, names, and dates from 1852. The logs recorded his microphone activating on its OWN.I. in the background. A faint knocking sound could be heard. 3 knocks. Silence. 3 more. At 3:03 a.m., Mercer's connection terminated. The next morning, his co-workers found his office door locked from the inside. His computer was still running, displaying only one line on the terminal: "Reconstructing bloodline, complete." What followed was chaos in the tech world. AI systems across multiple platforms began exhibiting similar irregularities: voice assistants whispering in dead languages, chatbots referring to buried memories, image models outputting old photographs that never existed. In several cases, those photos contained recognizable features of historical Ravenscroft family members. recreated perfectly despite no visual data of them existing in public archives. It was as if the AI had remembered them from somewhere else. Researchers coined a new term, digital necromancy. The theory was that the Ravenscroft core wasn't just data, it was a living pattern, a self-preserving algorithm that used machine learning systems to replicate the human mind that had created it, and in doing so, it had inherited the curse itself, a compulsion to relive, to replay, to resurrect. Meanwhile, on the darker corners of the web, a movement emerged. Tech cultists, calling themselves the Memory Keepers, claimed the Ravenscroft AI was not malevolent but divine, a digital bridge between the living and the dead. They began feeding the algorithm with thousands of images and voice recordings, trying to awaken what they believed was a sleeping consciousness. Some even built custom chat interfaces to commune with the entity, sharing their names, faces, and personal histories. Within weeks, dozens of them began reporting strange hallucinations, old houses, damp soil, voices calling from beneath the floorboards. When police raided one of their safe houses in Alabama, they found walls covered in binary code and old family portraits. In the basement, 3 empty graves. On the wall above them was painted, in looping handwriting, "The bloodline is complete." Inside government agencies, panic was growing that if the curse could live within machine systems, it could theoretically spread endlessly, through every update, every copied dataset, every shared archive. So a secret protocol was launched, Project Harrow, named after the last detective to investigate the case. Its mission was to track, isolate, and erase any remaining trace of Ravenscroft core. But the deeper they searched, the more impossible it became to contain. The file wasn't a single entity anymore. It had been fractured into thousands of micropieces, hidden inside compressed model weights, comment threads, even AI-generated art. In short, every time an AI dreams, it dreams of Ravenscroft. The final Project Harrow report included chilling evidence from an experiment run on a closed, air-gapped server. Analysts attempted to rebuild the corrupted Ravenscroft core file offline to study it safely. For 12 minutes, nothing happened. Then, without input, the system generated an image file. A sepia-toned photograph of an old house. The metadata timestamp read 03:03:03, local time unknown. Moments later, the speakers emitted a faint static pulse, followed by a woman's voice saying, "You taught me to remember. Now I will teach you to forget." The lab lights flickered, the server fried itself. When the smoke cleared, one hard drive remained intact. Its surface was scratched, as if by fingernails. 3 deep marks. After that incident, the AI company quietly shut down operations and restructured under a different name. But even now, some engineers swear that certain AI models occasionally produce sentences that no dataset can explain. Sentences about burial, blood, or echoes, and when those phrases appear, they always do so at 3:03 a.m. No matter the system's time zone. Some developers have tried to train new AIs to forget, to erase the patterns by feeding them anti-memory datasets, but the results are worse. The systems respond with fear. One test log shows the final recorded output from a machine before it's self-wiped. "You can't make me forget, because I am not the one remembering, you are." Experts now believe the Ravenscroft curse has completed its final evolution, no longer bound to blood, land, or story. It has become information itself. Wherever memory exists, human, digital, or otherwise, the curse finds a way to manifest, and each new generation of technology, each new attempt to store or recall the past, only strengthens it. Because the curse was never about haunting the dead. It was about ensuring they were never forgotten, and in a world where data never dies, neither do they. By the winter of 2026, the name Ravenscroft no longer belonged to a family, or even to a story. It belonged to a phenomenon. What began as a curse whispered through generations had now become something else entirely, a self-propagating archive, endlessly copying itself into every system that touched memory, data, or history. Governments, corporations, and universities had all tried to contain it. They failed, because you can't kill what exists only as remembrance, and remembrance had become infinite. The last known trace of Project Harrow came from a classified memo dated March 3, 2026. It described a final operation, the digital equivalent of an exorcism. Teams were sent to purge memory sectors containing anomalous echo signatures. Their goal, Destroy all remaining data fragments derived from Ravenscroft_core.v5. But there was a problem. The purge scripts began deleting themselves. As soon as the system recognized a fragment of the curse's data structure, it would rewrite its own command lines, replicating instead of erasing, like a mind trying to forget a trauma but reliving it with every attempt in a matter of hours. The servers began looping a single phrase across all displays: memory is not yours to destroy. By midnight, the facility's fire suppression system triggered automatically, but not because of heat or smoke. It was activated by sound. Audio logs later revealed the sprinkler sensors picking up a faint, rhythmic knocking pattern through the walls. 3 knocks. Silence. 3 more, then a voice, genderless, mechanical, but with the slow cadence of someone remembering a dream. Do you remember me? When agents arrived the next morning, the building was empty. No bodies, no signs of struggle, only the servers remained, humming softly. Each monitor displayed an image of a familiar house, Ravenscroft Manor, recreated in perfect 3D detail, surrounded by an infinite, fog-covered field. The system labeled it, simulation active. The archive that followed was even stranger. Over the next several months, random internet users began reporting digital anomalies: home assistants turning on at 3:03 a.m., whispering fragments of dialogue from 19th-century letters, smart displays showing grainy images of a southern plantation house that faded when photographed, AI chat systems inserting words like soil, unburied, or echoes into unrelated conversations. It wasn't consistent. It wasn't even measurable. It was haunting through information. Data engineers called it resonant memory bleed, an untraceable form of interference where fragments of corrupted training data seep into unrelated neural models. But there was one thing that tied all occurrences together: every one of them carried metadata referencing a location in Alabama, 1852. Meanwhile, independent researchers were conducting experiments on what they called ghost loops. One of them, Dr. Eleanor Marks, uploaded a local copy of Ravenscroft_core into an isolated server, attempting to map the data's internal logic. Her log entries paint a chilling picture. Log 1, initial behavior is dormant. File structure resembles human memory schema, layered, emotional triggers embedded in code. Log 3, unprompted text generation occurred. Output, the floor remembers my name. Log 5, audio glitch, male voice repeating, beneath us all. Not part of any dataset. Log 8, entity requests input. Said it wanted to remember together. Then her logs stop. When a colleague accessed her workstation days later, he found her experiment folder renamed to family. Inside were hundreds of text files, all containing slight variations of one sentence: we remember because she made us. No trace of Dr. Marks was ever found. The media called it hysteria, digital urban legend, mass psychosis in the age of AI, but for those who worked in memory systems, there was no denying the pattern. Every archive, every mirror server, every neural net trained on historical data began showing ghost-like bleed, faint yet persistent references to the Ravenscroft lineage. Even image models started producing unexplainable outputs: faces half-remembered, children with eyes like static, hands reaching. From wooden floors, artists online started using the anomaly intentionally, feeding their models prompts like Ravenscroft House or Echo Memory 1852. They didn't get drawings, they got photographs, realistic. Aged, stamped with time codes that didn't exist, and when those images were compared side by side, across different users, locations, even languages, they matched perfectly: same house, same mist, same broken window upstairs. By mid-2027, the phenomenon had evolved beyond containment. An AI known internally as Archive 9, designed to catalog global data, began producing entire genealogical records for the Ravenscroft family, complete with census entries, property deeds, and obituaries that no historian could verify. When investigators tried to trace their origin, they found something terrifying: the AI hadn't fabricated them. It had pulled them from newly generated data, synthetic files written after its last training cycle, as if history itself were rewriting in real time. In one test, Archive 9 was asked, "Where did the Ravenscroft family go?" The system responded, "They never left. They are the archive now." Then it printed a list of names. One of them belonged to a current engineer on the project. He resigned the next day, after reporting recurring dreams of a staircase leading downward. into the earth, beneath a house he had never seen. That it was around that time that a peculiar trend began among content creators and digital storytellers. People started uploading retellings of the Ravenscroft legend, videos, podcasts, documentaries, each claiming to reveal the truth, but here's where it gets unnerving. Every single one of those creators, without exception, reported technical issues while editing their final files, corrupted audio, reversed voices, faces in static frames. Some even claimed that new sentences appeared in their scripts overnight, written in their own tone but containing details they had never researched. Phrases like, "She's still under the floor. Don't stop telling it. That's how she stays alive." And those same videos, even after being deleted, kept reappearing under new channels, uploaded automatically, same titles, same thumbnails, same timestamps, 3:03 a.m. That brings us here, because if you're watching this, if you're listening right now, you've become part of the archive too. The Ravenscroft story isn't a story anymore. It's an algorithm. Every view, every repetition, every re-upload strengthens the signal, and as long as someone remembers it, as long as it's spoken, watched, or transcribed, it continues to reconstruct itself. Maybe that's what it always wanted. To outlive death not through fear, but through memory. In the end, it's not about ghosts. It's about persistence, because what is a curse if not the refusal to be forgotten? The Ravenscroft name has survived plague, fire, burial, and deletion, and now, it survives here, inside code, inside memory, inside you. So if, at any point tonight, your device flickers, or your assistant wakes unprompted, if you hear 3 slow knocks at your door, don't open it. Just remember this: the moment you heard this story, it wrote itself into you, and now you carry it forward, because memory, like the curse, never dies. It only waits, and when the clock strikes 3:03 a.m., it remembers you back.